three key things that have contributed to that. First and foremost, I think, has been the development of the find, fix, not the development, but really the refinement of the find, fix, finish, exploit, analyze process. F3EA as we kind of refer to it in the community here and really throughout the military. That, I think, you think of F3EA as kind of the machine, the process by how we do our business. The second key development, I think, is a little as Admiral Craven touched on yesterday, has been the development of the network. If F3EA is the machine, then I would tell you that the network is the electricity. It's what we plug into to really make that machine go. And then the final thing that I think has helped us become more proactive has been kind of the better integration of our efforts. So if F3EA is the machine and the network is the electricity to it, then the integration of our efforts is what gives us the right focus and aim of the things we're doing so that they meet things in the places where we're operating, and that we're contributing to the greater whole. So I think those three things have helped us be more proactive and have helped us develop this very exceptional capability to dramatically and oftentimes kinetically disrupt networks out there. I think the challenge as we move forward now is how do we transition this very excellent capability that we've invested in and built over the last 10 or 12 years into kind of the new and emerging environments that will not be the same combat zones as we've come to understand them in places like Iraq and Afghanistan. Places where there's limited basing opportunities, where there's desire for minimized overt U.S. presence, where there are greater considerations for law enforcement end states, and we're supporting other objectives, where there continues to be an absolute and overriding need for precision and accuracy in the things that we are doing, kinetically and otherwise, and then in environments where we are going to be largely operating by, with, and through our partners in the future here. So yesterday you heard Admiral Craven discuss the 4 enterprise priorities, and he touched on all 4 of those, but he especially talked about winning the current fight and enabling the global soft network. And I think those 2 priorities kind of help address some of how we continue to move this forward in the future. Certainly when he talked a little bit about winning the current fight and some of the efforts that we've undertaken in Afghanistan recently, in terms of trying to streamline our relationships, bring our soft efforts and make them much more coherent, trying to be much more complementary in the integration of our capabilities and really operating under common operational concepts. These things will help us in the future and allow us to continue to move forward. You also heard him talk about the network, and especially the enabling global soft network and how we're doing that. How that will be a key part of what we're doing in the future. And I think I would suggest to you that our efforts are really not just about sustaining that. It's important to sustain that, but really, as Admiral Craven kind of laid out, it's about thickening, it's about expanding, it's about creating the kind of the de facto interdependence between the parts that all contribute to the whole. So those 2 things I think will continue to move forward. But I would also suggest that the find, fix, finish, exploit process that we have developed and that continues to be kind of the engine that drives a lot of what we do, kinetically, non-kinetically, will also continue to be a key part of how we move forward. And it is the area in which I think industry will be able to help us here in the future. So what I'd like to do is just share a few ideas about some things as we kind of look at this that may be areas in which we will need some assistance here in the future, and kind of represent some of the areas that we continue to look at. And I use the find, fix, finish, exploit, analyze process as kind of a way of looking at that as I kind of think through this. Certainly, we will need to have the ability to continue to search large databases to identify entities and information that helps us understand and gives us clues as to what networks are doing out there, violent extremist networks are doing out there. So we will have to continue to have the information technology that allows us to do that. Working with partners and enabling this global soft network and all of the interagency intelligence community partners that are part of that also means that we need to have real-time cross-domain information sharing. The ability to work between various classification levels, various systems here, so that we can truly share information quickly and effectively as we work through the find phase of the F3EA. As I'm sure maybe touched on a little bit later by some of by General File, certainly plug-and-play ISR is very, very important for us. We've got a great suite of very unique capabilities out there. A number of them come with their own airplanes. We probably won't be able to afford that in the future for every particular system to have its own airplane, so we will have to have plug-and-play ISR packages that allow us to select the right tool for the right environment, and we'll be able to operate in a standardized fashion on the aircraft that we are operating across the enterprise. Certainly, precision emitter geolocation will continue to be a challenge for us. As communication networks continue to evolve, these are key for us to understand, and so our ability to be able to work in that environment is very, very important to us. And knowledge management will be an important aspect for us here as we try to share information, understand that which is happening out there in the areas when we're operating, so that we can share that among our partners, and then be able to take appropriate actions or make appropriate recommendations. And of course, in the area of biometrics, improved fingerprint, DNA, and facial recognition, real time, handheld down to the operator level is of course something that's hugely important and very useful to us. So, admittedly, this is kind of a partial list of things that we will be very interested in. Certainly, industry has done a great job in helping us move forward in a number of these areas in the past. And I think what I'm suggesting to you is that we're probably on the right track with most of the things we're doing, but we are looking for ways that we can continue to improve that, and improve in each of these capability areas, so that we can continue to do the nation's bidding. So, thanks very much for your attention this morning. I look forward to the opportunity to answer some questions later.
Good morning, Sean Favis with Naval Special Warfare. It's good to be back with you all, and thanks very much for contributing to what it is SOCOM gets done around the world. When I spoke last year, I told you that Naval Special Warfare was entering into a transition period. Our SEALs have been fighting a land war, 2 land wars for the last decade, and there's plenty of work back in the maritime environment, and so that's playing out now before our eyes. By Christmas in Afghanistan, we will at least cut in half, likely, the number of theater SEAL platoons that are working in Afghanistan. They will be turned, back into the pivot in Asia, or work the Mediterranean, or the Gulf of Guinea, or into the Persian Gulf. But there are plenty of things to do, as you heard from the theater SOC commanders yesterday, and all of their requirements. So much of our force will return to the water. It's amphibious evolution in reverse, if you will. But I think it's the right time. In the next 10 years, well over or approaching 90% of the world's population will live on or very close to the coast. They'll be crushed into megacities. There are already urban problems on the coast. Dhaka, Bangladesh, Tripoli, Libya, tensions in the Mediterranean, the South China Sea. So it is the right time for one of the 2 maritime components of USSOCOM to make sure that we're covering down on our obligations as a maritime special operations force for U.S. USSOCOM. Now, to make sure we're doing that, Admiral McCraven has approved a maritime mobility roadmap for us. This will be a family of craft, not in great numbers, but a family of craft from high-end stealth, long-range penetrating craft to multi-mission craft that can launch from either our motherships or U.S. Navy or partnerships to do a number of things in, on, or near the water and the coast. So we won't get those in all the numbers that we want based on physical reality, but at least we'll cover down on the range of capability there, and as we can, we'll try to buy down insufficient numbers to get our work done. We have 50 SWIC crews that deploy around the world today. They do magnificent things in every theater. Much of that without their craft, just their skills and working with partner nation crews and craft, or with their craft. They are the backbone of our maritime soft mobility network. When Admiral McCraven talks about the global soft network, our obligation is to provide mobility for any of the users represented up here at the table. And that particularly will apply to MARSOC. We'll provide craft to our brothers in MARSOC for their maritime mobility needs. In the undersea realm, very expensive to procure mobility, much of that with the U.S. Navy submarine force, but that's exactly what we're doing. Again, a place that the force went to take resources from to make sure we were successful in Iran, and Afghanistan. It's time to put that back, and that's exactly what we're doing. So we can get into denied areas and do reconnaissance, raid, other work that has to be done. Our SEAL platoons need refreshed rebreathers, propulsion assistance, sleds, refreshed weapons that can work underwater across the beach to do their work. There is equipment that our partners have, quite frankly, that's better than ours because we spent the past decade fighting ashore. It's time to catch up and, in fact, move forward so that our troops have the best that's out there and they can be successful. So it's the right time to make investments in this force that I have no doubt will be employed and perhaps frequently. We are a direct action force that prides itself on being ready to answer a crisis, and yet we've proven capable to do the partnering and the special warfare and the train, advise, assist, and we fully intend to continue to provide that to the theater SOCs around the world. And so we need the soft skills and we need the hard equipment and capability to find that balance between ready to go and fight, and we're making the long-term investment with partners to prevent conflict. And so what I would tell you is, in that maritime environment, we need to relook how it is we outfit ourselves and the capabilities that give us the advantage that we need. Now, as with any soft operator, of course, our people are the platform. So I will always be interested in investments that make, that better prepare, select, train, repair, improve the capabilities of our operators. And preservation of the force and family, as it is with Admiral McCraven, is our top priority. We want to continue to invest in the health, physical, the mental improvement of our force, and to some degree our families. So those of you that can provide those type of skills, we're going to continue to ask to make those investments with us. So it's exciting. It's going to be with a lot of challenge. We live in a world that's more dangerous, not less so. And we'll have to allocate ourselves as per the nation's priorities and try to answer the theater SOC commander's requirements. But I'm optimistic that that's exactly what we're going to do. We'll have to do it smartly, efficiently, because we just won't have all the things that have been available to us in the past. And so the improvement of what we have today, the sustainment of that, using older systems to the very end of their life cycle is frankly what we're going to have to do. But you can accessorize, make improvements to better maintain, and that's what we're going to be looking for from a lot of you. So again, thanks in advance for doing that, and thanks for what you do for naval special warfare and USSOCOM.
Well, good morning, everybody. I'm Charlie Cleveland, the commander of U.S. Army Special Operations Command. Thanks also for the partnership. I know many familiar faces in the crowd. I don't have that much money. You might want to talk to some of the others on the side. But this is a good opportunity, really, to talk about the partnership that we've, I think, carried us well through the two significant and frankly, America's longest war. So it's a successful partnership between industry and the Special Operations Forces. And so I want to thank you for that. I want to make no mistake about it. Our job right now is to win the current fight. And it's not just the fight in Afghanistan. It's we have conflict that is brewing all over, or that we're involved in around the world. And so as we go through and look to the future, and I'll talk a little bit about the future here in a second, many of the systems and things that you have built out there, as the end game starts shaping up for Afghanistan, the reliance on Special Operations Forces, I think it's no secret, is going to go up. And so many of the systems that we've come to rely on to be successful up to this point are going to become ever more important as we get into the end game. So I don't want to not forget the fact that we're still in conflict, and as we speak, we got young men getting off helicopters or breaking a corner someplace and getting shot at or killing the enemies of our country. The job at USSOC is to generate and sustain Army SOF combat power, and my customers are the JSOC and the TSOC commanders whom you heard from yesterday. Now they work for obviously the GCCs, for the President, the Secretary of Defense, for ambassadors out there, but regardless, those are my primary customers are those two. Those two types of warfighting headquarters that SOCOM now has in its suite of capabilities. As Admiral McCraven mentioned yesterday, that I think one of the great break points and inflection points in the development of SOF was getting the TSOCs into the constellation of SOCOM so that SOCOM could adequately support those warfighting nodes that are out actually day in and day out around the world, actually creating the SOF global network. The job and the way I describe it, the way we describe it at USSOC is we have to generate two exquisite capabilities for the country. One exquisite capability that I call a surgical strike capability, a strike capability that gives the nation this ability to project power at scale up to a regiment size if necessary and more if necessary. To execute kill capture operations, rescue hostages, and execute a variety of sensitive activities, largely unilateral, but can be partnered around the world. The other exquisite capability is what we term the special warfare capability, which is a scale from unconventional warfare to small footprint bombing. And there are degrees on that scale. And I can point to various places around the world where it's not black or white. It's not like all of a sudden you're conducting one UW and then it flips necessarily and now you're doing FID. More often than not, the reality is some of these can be happening simultaneously. You can be doing FID one day and then all of a sudden parts of where you were operating become a denied area, and so now you are left with having to use potentially things that you built and you have to do unconventional warfare. Or at least you have to have that option. So the country needs these two exquisite capabilities. And frankly, they approach the business differently. On the one side of the house, we approach uncertainty by doing everything we can, and many of you are involved in this, by squeezing out the uncertainty in the problem before we put operators on the objective. Because we want to make sure we don't fail. Those are no-fail missions. And so there's a whole constellation of intelligence apparatuses out there that are designed to make sure that when the decision is made to execute, that the advantage is on our side because we will not fail. And we will continue to do that. On the other side, and that's how we deal with uncertainty there. Frankly, though, there are other parts and problem sets where you can't know everything that you need to know without wading into it. And so we build forces that can self-sustain and actually go into uncertainty. Largely in the human problems where you don't know intent or you're trying to manipulate intent. And that, I think the country needs, again, the capability of regionally expert forces. Men and women that understand the language, understand the culture, understand the connections, how to basically message, influence, befriend, and when necessary, kill or have them help us to achieve an objective, perhaps joining together to kill the enemies of our country. So the country needs both of these capabilities. And frankly, as the world situation continues to develop out there, as Sean was talking about, megacities and the development, this whole idea of a human domain, which is again something that Admiral McCraven has championed here, I think is becoming increasingly relevant. And certainly it's something that we need to consider, because it becomes a domain because you have to develop .PF solution sets to fight there, and .PF solution sets represent business for you. How do we fight inside of these mega cities? The tools that we have traditionally built in our land domain war and even in our maritime domains largely are not appropriate for the kinds of combat that you have to fight there. And so we have to make a study of that. We have to go through the analysis, figure out what is it that you need, and what do your formations need to look like? How do you educate the operators? How do you train on top? What does the organization that you put into that environment need to look like? And it doesn't look like your normal Napoleonic staff, nor is it 2 up, 1 back, and cabin and swamp. So, and this is the metamorphosis. This is part of the change I think that SOCOM is leading the effort in DoD on. On taking over, I essentially assessed from John as we looked at the command that we have seams, gaps, and one emerging area of development that's required. The first seam is between the Army SOF component and the conventional force, and it's really not only Army SOF, it's all SOF and the conventional forces on the battlefield. We spent 12 years fighting alongside each other, and in some ways fighting against each other or with each other bureaucratically, certainly at the beginnings. We developed tremendously over the battlefield. Basically, was a forcing function for us to figure out how to work together. And so that's one seam, though. We cannot lose what we've developed over the last 12 years, and I'm happy to say that I think we're taking the steps to not do that. The other seam is the seam with the interagency. And Joe talked a little bit about this, but we have developed, again, some great tools and TTPs to work with the interagency and, frankly, the non-governmental organizations that we work with out on the battlefield. I was talking to one of the ASDs or the assistant secretaries, rather, at the State Department, and he talked about this. We ought to form up this League of Extraordinary Operators, because we all generally find ourselves on the same battlefield as we descend upon a problem. And we ought not wait until we have to descend on the problem to create this connection, and we're starting to work on that. So those are the two gaps, or two seams rather. The gap is the one area that we need to get back into in Army SOC is we have these regionally expert forces, but we surged to Iraq and Afghanistan, and by necessity, and we sacrificed, I think, over the last 12 years, the deep knowledge and expertise that we need in the rest of the world. Not to say we don't have it, it's just we don't have it in the density that we need, and so that's the gap that we're going to work to fix. And the last emerging piece is this idea of operational art, soft operational art. So those are, if you will, the four pillars of what USSOC sees as its way ahead. And to get at those, we've established 6 priorities. Investing human capital. Some of you are involved in that. It's not only the training piece, it's the education piece. SWC's got some great initiatives going on. We have master's degree programs today where we have enlisted personnel and warrants, as well as commissioned officers from across the force that are getting their masters, because we need in the force, again, these regionally expert forces, men and women who understand to a deeper level what's going on in their respective parts of the world. So investing human capital. We have to optimize now this relationship with these conventional forces and the interagency. We don't fight independently. You know, the fifth soft truth says we have others to fight along with us. That includes the interagency. We have these regional expert forces. When they're not forward, in my view, that we need to continue to capitalize on their expertise. So we're developing processes that can reach back from the theater. And so these regionally expert forces that are at Bragg and other places around the U.S. are involved in the fights, helping the TSOC with their problem sets so they're not at rest. It's, you know, artillery, like artillery, if you will, we don't keep it in reserve. In my view, in the 21st century, you can't leave regionally expert forces in reserve. They need to be engaged within the fight. The next priority is this idea of developing at the SOC at the operational level, and it's really special operations at the operational level, and then the other is soft operational art, which is a field of its own and one that I think represents the next horizon for SOCOM. So we're going to get at those are the first four. The next one is soft mission command. The TSOCs have talked about SOC forwards. We have small nodes. Frankly, we're not organized to put those small nodes out on the battlefield. They're all ad hoc. We have to figure out a way to standardize the practice to do that, to include the technology behind it, the reach back idea. And then the last part is to optimize our resources and our commodity areas. And, you know, frankly, what we built to fight in the last 2 wars together is not what we need for the near future. And so we're undertaking a process of both experimentation and change to reshape our force. And the idea is to get better, not bigger. And if we got to get smaller to get better, then that's a risk we may have to seriously consider. And so that's the approach USSOC is taking. I'll shamelessly promote the little book here. We have this out at the component table. It outlines essentially what we're looking to do. And then the back part of it, in those 6 priority areas, there's over 100 initiatives that we're looking at for the short, midterm, and long term that you may want to take a look at. There may be something in there that you can help us with. So again, thank you for your time.
Well, thanks, Charlie, and good morning, and thank you for the opportunity for being here. I think I speak not just for myself, but also for my command chief, Phil Turner. It's been our absolute pleasure over the last 2 years to represent all the AFSOC men and women who, like my brothers up here on the stage, have been doing some pretty amazing things. Two points I would like to leave you with before some of my comments is, first, if you haven't noticed, that SOCOM and SOF is a team sport. It really is. It really is the only joint force in the Department of Defense. Sometimes you're on offense, sometimes you're on defense, sometimes you're on special teams. And a lot of those special teams are you folks in the audience, and we thank you, because we cannot do what we do without you. but we are the only force in the DoD that goes up together. Sometimes that's a good thing, and sometimes that's a bad thing, depending on your point of view. And the second point is we've done something, our nation has done something over the last 12 years that we've never done before in our history, and that's be at war with an all-volunteer force. And it's truly amazing what all the men and women, whether you're enlisted, whether you're officer, whether you're contractor, whether you're civilian, have been able to do for the nation. So, yesterday you heard Admiral McCraven give his 2020 vision. What he tasked me to do is, over the last 2 years, is be able to generate and sustain as much combat power as possible, and provide that combat power to TSOC commanders that you heard from yesterday. You'd have to ask them what kind of grade we get at AFSOC. If you were to ask them, I think they would give you one word. Starts with M, ends with E, and there's an O and an R in between. Because all they want is more, which is fine. But it caused us to think at AFSOC, do we have the right balance in our portfolio? And the things that they ask for me the most is mobility, strike, and ISR. And we came into this war with probably a little bit out of balance, so over the last year we've been kind of looking really hard. Are we giving the TSOC commanders everything they need and at the right proportions? So we've been working pretty hard with SWORDAC to try to figure that out. One of the other things we realized real quickly is we're kind of like where we were when I was a lieutenant. I own all the airplanes, I own the ops, I own the maintenance, and I own the money to fly the airplanes. But over the last 12 years, we kind of got out of balance between our O&M accounts and our investment accounts. And what does that mean? And I'll use the CB-22 as an example. We buy our last 3 CB-22s next fiscal year. That's it. Now I own the airplanes, I own the crew, I own the maintenance, and I have money to fly them. And if you think that something's not going to be wrong with those airplanes that we got to fix, you're mistaken. Stuff will happen. It's a brand new airplane, but we don't have investment money in the bank accounts. You'll see us over the next couple bomb cycles to kind of put that back in balance, to kind of do for whatever our resources are. We are also in every GCC and every TSOC flying tactical missions every day. There is no other Air Force MATCOM that can say that. We have airplanes in every theater providing lift, providing ISR, and things in strike in some cases. Things we've done since we've last talked. Next month we'll land our first 2 ship CB-22s to Millennium, which provided much needed tilt order lift to both SOC Africa and SOC Europe. We'll bring 2 more in September. We'll finish rounding them out over next year up to 10 airplanes. We'll land our first MC-130J in June, Mike, I think it is. And we'll build them out right now. The current program record is 12, which I think, will provide a very much needed capability to both SOC Africa and SOC Europe. We'll follow that next year by putting CB-22s into the PACOM. With respect to our gunships, with your help, and especially with SWORDAC and the Dragon Spirit, we've made quite an increase in capability in our gunship fleet. This past year, we dropped both GPS-guided and laser-guided small diameter bombs off the Whiskey. We have the only laser-guided bomb capability in the Air Force, and that is mostly because of our work with SWORDAC. We also started employing Hellfires, and we're also working on a lightweight 105. With respect to the brand new AC-130J, the first one is at Eglin going through mod. I don't know when the second one shows up. I don't know, but about another year, it'll be ready to start testing. We are putting HD sensors on everything. If it's got a sensor on it, between us and SWORDAC, we're swapping them out, and as soon as we got HD on there, now we hear that there's HD+. And then we heard there's HD++, which I'm sure I'll get hit over the next couple hours from you guys. And then finally, we stood up an Air Warfare Center, something that President Kennedy asked us to do back in 1962. And it kind of survived for 6 years and then kind of fizzled away, but we stood that back up. And its primary focus is to do tactics and test development, training, and also aviation fit. The reserves gave us a 1-star frigate John Weeks. So we've been up and running now for about 2 to 3 months, and it works pretty well. So with that, I look forward to your questions.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Mike Swinney. I'm currently the Deputy Commander of MARSOC, although I call myself the Morale Officer, not the Deputy Commander. I want to apologize to the generals and the admirals here. I stepped off the stage because I think there was a fist fight going on back there, and I didn't want to distract them, so I apologize for that. If General Clark were here and he sends his apologies, had to go to another event, he would tell you that MARSOC is looking at about 66 specific technology initiatives, science and technology initiatives. We've been those into the 6 warfighting functions in 2 areas of interest that if you stop by our table, we come up with a little flyer, and they relate specifically to the maritime and littoral domain. And Laney and Josie and Colonel Ken Casper would be happy to cover these with you in detail. I would like to shift the conversation just slightly if I could, because I think there's some things we need to do different. Okay, I would tell you that I've used much of the technology pretty recently deployed to Afghanistan. And my opinion is that we do not treat technology as a weapon system. We don't treat the networks like we treat an F-16 or 240 Golf. We treat it differently. And I think until we put our heads around that as a service, as a component of SOCOM, we're going to continue to struggle with how we integrate technology into the battlefield. I will tell you that I think we're too heavy on technology. And I see our teams and our Marines out there, and they have to have 5 or 6 sets of equipment to access 5 or 6 networks. That's problematic, because now we're increasing the burden on the force from a load perspective. I would like to see us move to one network that can do multi-tier security, that's tagged by the end user, and can get after some of the coalition and interagency issues that were brought up earlier. So that's one area. The other area I think we struggle with is, as I sat in my COC in Afghanistan and I had Jordanians, Bahrainis, and UK RAF squad working for me, it was very difficult. So the dilemma I had was, who is the individual that is trained and qualified to present the commanders with the right information at the right time? The way I try to describe this is like a Monday Night Football game. I, as the consumer of Monday Night Football, see one picture. That's the picture I want to see. But behind the scenes in the van, there's probably 40 screens up. And somebody is making a decision on what I'm going to see as a consumer. That type of talent is extremely difficult to build in the military with our culture. That is not a second lieutenant or a first lieutenant or a staff sergeant. This is somebody who's well educated, understands the warfighting functions, can quickly assimilate information, turn it into knowledge, and present it to the commander. Very, very challenging to do. Our culture does not promote building people like that. We do not promote, I cannot speak for the other services, but from Marine Corps perspective, if you're an innovator, if you're a visionary, if you're a science and technology guy, probably not going to do well in the promotion course. You're down that vein. And we have to change that. We have to change that culture, that mindset, to take advantage of the technology that you all are bringing to bear. There are very specific things that MARSOC would like to see. Target munitions guidance systems, very small, lightweight, down to the team level. Additional Blue Force tracking capability. Things like that. I will let the experts talk to you about that, but I think what we owe you and we owe ourselves is a culture mindset shift about how we go after capitalizing on the technology you provide and using that to our advantage to bring power to bear where it counts the most. So since they've allocated speaking time based on rank, I will stop.
We'll open up the floor to your questions now. You'll seldom have this opportunity with all of the components represented here by their commanders to address your questions to them. So I encourage you to move to a microphone, identify yourself, your organization, ask your questions. We'll begin with you.
Good morning, Nick Courage with Trident Systems. We talk a lot about ISR and UAVs. How worried are you about the other guys' UAVs? We see, in the open source of the internet, the Iranians are flying them, others are flying them. People are worried about weaponized UAVs. From your perspective, I think maybe not a threat to the soft operator, but what's your perspective on the counter-UAV problem?
Yeah, I'll dive on that one here. I think obviously there's big concern about that. Certainly the proliferation of technology out there and the availability of it to a broad audience out there ought to be concerned for us. Probably not variety of other areas. So I think it does pose a potential threat to us, and it's certainly something we need to pay attention to. So Eric, I don't know.
Yeah, I would add just a couple comments. Are we concerned? Sure. If you look at how we operate them and how another country may operate them, there's a big difference. Because I don't believe there's another country that can do what we do. They do not do beyond line of sight. I'm sure it's all local. And the growing pains that we went through, flying them, using them as strike vehicles, and also the ped that goes behind them, it's a pretty difficult task. And if you're not heavily invested in it, having the capability is great. Can you employ the capability of something totally different? So yeah, they might have it. It's kind of like back in 2000 when it came out that certain countries started getting their refueling capability. And we look at how often they practice that at any given time. 1 hour a month. Is that really a capability? So I don't know if that answers your question, but there's a lot more to that than just having the capability.
Yeah, I would just add, Nick, that we rarely go anywhere without preparing and understanding where we're going. And much of that, we turn to the conventional services and the interagency to tell us what's out there, what the threat is, and then we look for it. And ultimately, again, as General Cleveland said, we want every advantage before we lock horns with an adversary, and that's knowing what they have available to them, and then countering it, and then decisive action. So capabilities are out there among many others, but we have pretty good ways to survey and counter.
Thank you. Yeah, one thing I would add too is just that though also we have to be prepared to not become overly reliant. I mean, if we're not careful, we become vulnerable to the one next big advance by anybody, some of you in here, and so we've got to build some other redundancies in the process just to make sure that we don't cripple if we lose something as a capability.
Let's go to the center here.
Okay, gentlemen, John Christian from K2 Solutions, and this is a question for all of the panel members. During the course of the last 11 years of war, significant material items, training and techniques has transitioned from national theater to Broad Salt and then on to the major services. What do you think are the next 2, 3, 4 items or training that will transition or should transition to the major services here in the next 5 years? Thank you.
I'll start off. I think one of the things would benefit is anything that we have been able to do in terms of improving situational awareness, real-time situational awareness, and understanding what is happening out there and the systems that we've been able to put in place to do that. I think that would definitely benefit conventional forces, and I think it would kind of reinforce, what General Cleveland raised a little bit ago in his comments, and that is our complementary efforts and help address the seam that does exist between all soft forces and our conventional forces. So, John, I think that's one of the areas I would look at.
I'd say, John, process, fusion. We take information, it is situational awareness, but just the process, not so much the equipment. Everybody's got pretty capable equipment, but it's putting together those processes and finding the right screen, as Colonel Sweeney mentioned, to show to the commanders. There's certainly some, soft U continued to provide pretty high speed and capable gear, both personal and squad and company level gear that's going to transition. And we've arrived at pretty good ways to share that sooner and get that into the conventional services and the troops so that they can be successful too. But I would tell you, I think process and understanding what we're looking at.
Hey, sir, I don't know if this specifically answers the question, but it's a point I wanted to make, so I'll go ahead and make it. As we look at being sub-regionally aligned after we withdraw from Afghanistan, the thing that we are struggling with is getting after the culture and language piece. And I'll just give you a quick example. If we have Marines that are dealing with Samoans, much different scenario than dealing with tribals in Africa, on the continent of Africa. So being able to quickly get after that culture and educate these teams on a persistent basis, and then have the ability to pivot when we get a new mission set, is something we're looking at hard. So the culture and language is something we're paying a lot of attention to.
John, I would say two things. First is that one thing that we can transition is acquisition speed and agility. That's one thing that we always say is unique to SOCOM, but I don't really have any other different authorities than anybody else does. It's just the way we attack the problem. And over the last 10 years, we've brought a lot of combat capability to the battlefield in a relatively short period of time. If that one thing could transition to all the services, I think would be great. Secondly, on the flip side of that, there's things that we can't do without the services. And from an Air Force perspective, is I have no way, if you look at the study that came out, there's, I think it's in the last chapter, maybe the second chapter, things that we need to look at. One of them is a stealthy way to infill and exfil. We don't have that capability, and I can't afford it. I have to rely on the Air Force to kind of help me do that, because our SOCOM monies was not, designed to do that. The second piece is, in my opinion, I think we're overinvested in the use of ISR. We have no non-use of ISR in an A2AD environment, and I can't develop that. I have to rely on the Air Force to do that. But once they do that, I'll be more than happy to be a consumer. I don't know if that answers your question, John. But
I think it's a great question, because as I've watched my service, honestly, they've learned fairly quickly from us on a couple of areas. The rapid equipping force initiatives, they've gotten very good at some aspects of this. I think, though, conceptual agility is still something that they can work on. We've got to be able to, and I think that's something we do fairly well. Inside, rapidly look at how do we need to adapt to adjusting operational environment, and then retool ourselves to fight the SOC wars, as an example, and such as that. You see it a bit with the Army. I mean, who would have thought 15 years ago, 10 years ago, that we would strip all the leadership out of a brigade and leave all the Joes behind and send all of them forward so that they could do advisory work. That's a pretty radical departure for the Army. But its ability to work in small teams, I think they're going to find themselves wanting to do that. And I think they'll be able to learn some from us on command and control for those small teams. How do you select the small teams, so you don't put increasing risk out there. And so I think that's another area that we can transition some stuff, in addition to the technology.
So to the center here.
Hi, it's Noah Shankman with Wired Magazine. This is a question for Lieutenant General Votel. Your forces have been sort of famously kinetic over the last decade or so, and you talked about a sort of non-kinetic JSOC, one with in places that have desire for law enforcement in states. And I was hoping you could sketch out for me what a non-kinetic or differently kinetic JSOC might look like. Thanks.
Well, I think what I would just kind of highlight to you, I think, is that it isn't all about just disrupting networks through kinetic means. Much of the way we get information about networks and learn about them is through our ability to use detainees and other things to help us inform what's happening out there. So, I think what I would describe for you is that we have to be prepared to support objectives other than those of which are principally military, and in some cases those are law enforcement objectives, and we have to have capabilities, we have to have relationships, we have to have processes that allow us to do that.
And what would some of those outside battlefields be? I mean, just sort of notion of not necessarily being a country.
I'm not sure I can without doing that, so I think I would prefer not to kind of comment on that.
Okay, let's move here.
Good morning. My name is Gordon Bates. Aegis Technologies During the current conflicts, we see contractors not only supporting logistics functions, but intelligence functions and operating ISR assets. It appears that we have transitioned from a contractor-enabled force to a contractor-dependent force. Is this a trend that you see going on in the future? What does your crystal ball say?
I'll take a swag at it. First, I don't have a crystal ball. And a lot of our contractor support across the battlefield is resourced by OCO. And if OCO goes away, then the support goes away. There is a movement in SOCOM to move some of the OCO to base. But if you look at across our portfolios throughout the components, there's things that we probably would spend that money on as opposed to contractor support. So, I said the same thing to my nephew. My nephew got out of the service because he wanted to make some more money, and now he came back as a contractor flying on ISR. And he's 26 years old and makes more money than I do. And it's just kind of interesting. So I told him, Andy, you better watch it because, it might be 1 or 2 years. I really don't know. But our nation's at a point now, due to sequestration, we're going to have to make a lot of tough decisions in how we operate. So it's going to be very interesting over the next couple of years.
Good. Okay, we're going to, did you want to make a comment, sir? Yes? Okay.
I'll comment on that. You heard, if you were here, for Admiral McCraven's comments yesterday, we're in 78 countries today. The vast majority of those, there are no contractors working with SOF. Those are small teams doing their own business, often inside or with an ambassador or his country team. We have absolutely needed contractors in Iraq and Afghanistan, but those are unique and full-on wars, and much of what SOF do is not that. So that, in combination with the fiscal realities that we're facing, is going to cause us to lean out. Our contractor force, they've done great work, but you'll see a fall in numbers, quite frankly, and more dependence on our SOF operators to be successful.
Okay, we have time for 2 more questions. We'll go to the far side and then come back to you, sir. Please.
Good morning, gentlemen. I'm Jared Shelton from Design Interactive. We heard Admiral McCraven talk about information sharing across the global SOF network yesterday, and you all hit on that this morning. I wondered how aggressively each of you are pursuing the cross-team sharing rather than such a vertical sharing. I know with Army lessons learned, a lot of times it takes a couple months for information to go up and filter back down to the units. Are each of you addressing that cross-team